first we'll start off and we'll talk about the general atmosphere of Mac computers in a business environment, and then we'll speak to IT, because IT really does have some say-so in whether or not Apple products are going to be allowed within the four walls. So without further ado, let's dive in. So on the screen you'll see an old bit of marketing from Apple. This was some marketing from about 10 years ago, and you'll see one of the original iPods in the hand of somebody dancing there. And this is very powerful marketing. I think we probably all remember this. And it does give one the impression that Apple is a consumer company. And while that is true in that we make products that consumers use, at Apple we like to think of ourselves as a product company. And we like to think that we make great products that are suited for both consumer life as well as a business life. So behind every consumer is, of course, an employee for the most part, unless you're very wealthy or at some point unemployed. But for the majority of the people on this call, I assume we're all employed, and we also hopefully all use Apple products. And there's been an interesting shift over the last, I would say, 5 years, especially with the introduction of the iPhone, where back in the old days, IT would control what products would come into the four walls, and it was usually a PC. And with the advent of the iPhone, we saw people bringing iPhones into the office, and then especially when the iPad hit the market, things really accelerated in business. We saw executives bringing iPads in along with their iPhones, and we saw a huge influx of pressure on IT to begin to support iPads and iPhones within the business. And this pressure came not only from the consumer, but from the executives. So you're hard-pressed at this point to find any company out there that's not actively engaging and supporting iPhones and iPads for productivity. But then when you look closer, you'll notice that there are much more applied instances of iPads, especially in the workplace. So iPhones and iPads, great for productivity. You can check your mail on them, do your calendaring. Very good tool for when we're roaming around society and you want to work when you're not at the office. But more importantly, we're seeing, again, this transformation of people's businesses around the technology. iPads are being used as menus. They're being used as devices in airplane cockpits to plan trajectories and file flight paths and all that stuff. We see custom applications that are replacing clipboards so that people don't do data entry after taking down data on a piece of paper. It's really making business more efficient, and business leaders all over the world are seeing how those products can streamline and improve their performance as a company and give them even a competitive edge in many cases. So let's get back and talk about Macs. Back in the old days, as I said, PCs were really the standard. And there was not a lot of room for Apple products, the Macs within a business, and things have changed quite a bit. You'll see from InfoWorld here, Gartner was quoted as saying, for bread and butter computing, it's been a Windows-only world. That's changing fast. Gartner says IT will consider Macs to be as valid as Windows PCs next year. And this is more and more true. As the iPhone and iPad have become more accepted within IT, we've seen that the Mac computers are also becoming much more accepted. They're no longer sitting in the marketing department or the creative departments. They're branching out, and we're seeing a lot of opportunity with Macs being deployed in many more departments nowadays, because as people are migrating away from the old Windows world where licensing schemes were very expensive, and now we have Windows 8 and ActiveX and all these sort of restrictive environments on the website are being phased out, IT departments are being forced to change those systems that were traditionally Windows systems, and most IT organizations nowadays are changing them to be open access, if you will. So HTML5 is replacing ActiveX and things such as that. And the beauty of that as an IT department is that, you know, you can maintain one sort of web platform and you'll never have to redesign it, hopefully, over the years, and just mature it for the next version of HTML. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the work environment and the infrastructure when it comes to using Macs within the workplace. Now, here's another good quote. This is Forrester. Again, Forrester was never necessarily our friend at Apple, but you'll see back in 2008 they said IT departments crave standardization and Macs pose too many problems. Right? The verdict for the enterprise-focused vendors is clear. Unless your market is a niche business group like marketing, right? Windows is the only desktop you need to support. Now, this is, of course, what we saw, like I said, 5 years ago plus. And let's take a look and see what they say nowadays. 2011. Complete U-turn. People are bringing Macs to work. It's time to repeal prohibition. So even Forrester is saying, look, it's time to look at the economy, look at the real world of people and how they use computers nowadays. People are bringing them into the office. They're in the office many times, whether you know it or not. And IT needs to adjust for that to make sure that these computers that are being brought in, first of all, are being secured properly. And not only that, we need to pay attention to what the demand is of the organization. And the organization oftentimes is saying, hey, we don't need to use a PC. It's a very poor user experience. We want to use a Mac. And there's a lot of justification for that. And as I go further through this slide deck, we'll address some of the concerns that that both IT and traditional corporate leaders have had about Macs when it comes to costs, and also we'll get into really why it makes a huge difference to your business in the end to allow Macs within your company. And lastly, I don't want to quote you to death here, but GE's chief CTO Greg Simpson said, to find out we support Apple, we support iPhones, we support Macs. It does take away one question for people. Are they a contemporary company or not? And this is GE. Now, GE is not exactly what I consider the most, newest innovator in terms of technology. I mean, they really are. They do quite a bit of industry and cutting-edge industry, but this is an old company, and old companies tend to get stuck in their ways, and GE is definitely not one to fit that mold. They've broken out of that shell, and they've said, listen, we as IT, we as business leaders realize that it's not feasible. It's not helping us to tie down to one platform and keep Macs out of the hands of the business. Instead, our IT organization needs to recognize the realities of the modern world. We need to let these computers in. We as IT are no longer the deciding organization as to what that standardization is. Instead, the business has demanded that we let in all platforms, and that's how most businesses are evolving. You know, read any of the think tanks and open your eyes, and you'll see that's the case. So anyway, I digress. Not to speak to IT, I want to talk about how Mac computers have been written to integrate into the enterprise. Earlier I was saying it's a common perception that Apple products are consumer products. Quite to the contrary, they're not aimed solely at the consumer. Mind you, they're incredible products. People enjoy using them that are consumers. But if it was a purely consumer play, why would Apple support Exchange, DFS, full disk encryption, Kerberos? These are things that are obviously used by your business, and Apple has written this software our operating system to seamlessly integrate with the enterprise infrastructure, right? So you'll be very hard-pressed to find any standard that we don't support. You should be able to bring your Mac in from home or buy a pallet of Macs and distribute them. They're going to work perfectly in your environment. So let's take a closer look at exactly how we integrate. Here's some buzzwords that we end up discussing when we sit down with business leaders and executives. So we talk about, how great the products are, obviously, how we integrate, we're very secure, and how we're managed within, just as you would manage PCs. And then we'll talk about, in a few minutes, lower support costs and trade-in value. All of these things together make a very compelling conversation when it comes to considering deploying Macs in place of PCs in your environment. And by the way, I'm not arguing for all PCs to be thrown out and Macs to be put in front of every end user. That is completely infeasible. The reality is, and I'm not living in some ivory tower where I think that's a reality. That's not going to happen in 99.9% of the cases. Let's face it. There are applications that are being used by end users that are only going to run on a PC. So what we are suggesting here is that certain end users be allowed to bring in a Mac, and that's going to benefit your business quite a bit. And we'll talk about why that is in a few minutes. Besides, being cost beneficial as well as being very desirable for new hires. But anyway, I digress. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just move through this slide deck here. So for IT and for anybody in the audience that is interested in putting a Mac in front of themselves, the question might be, how do I know that this Mac is going to give me the same or better user experience than a PC? All right. Well, in terms of the infrastructure, you'll see here that Apple has a version of Office that runs very nicely, and files can go between a PC and a Mac with almost consistently without any issues. So, if your coworker emails you from a PC a Word file, it's going to open up perfectly. You'll be able to edit it, send it back, it'll open perfectly on the PC. When it comes to file and print serving, if you have a network home directory or if you have a print server that you send data to be printed, absolute 100% integration with that. You'll be able to access all those resources. Networks, if you have very complex authentication or very simple authentication, you're going to be able to connect wirelessly or wired to whatever network is out there. That includes VPN as well. So if you have an SSL VPN, even some very rare VPNs that are out there, we support them all. So you should have absolutely no issues there. And then when it comes to Windows applications, you have a couple of choices. First of all, if you felt so inclined, if you had one Windows application that you needed to run, then there may be sometimes an Office computer that people share to hit that resource. In other cases, you might run an emulation software where you run Citrix or Parallels. These are softwares that allow you to run a Windows application on the Mac in the Mac environment itself. You can also do a dual boot scenario where you're running the Mac OS or you reboot the computer, you run the Mac OS, and if you need to use a Windows application, you reboot the computer into Windows. Because we have an Intel chipset, you can run Windows and the Mac OS on the same computer. Just reboot and you're into Windows. And then lastly, there are companies out there that will rewrite your applications for you. So if the application that you're using is a Windows-based application, you could pay a modest sum and do some cost analysis and do a little investigation and reach out to me if you'd like to know who these developers are. But they can, if it's a simple app that's, say, a front end to a database, it can be quite inexpensive to rewrite that application so you have a Windows version and a Mac version. And let me tell you, there's no dearth of Mac developers out there right now. There are so many developers that are writing apps for the iOS, for the iPhone and iPad. It's very easy to find all those developers. They can write Mac apps as well. It's all the same programming language. So if you need a Mac app written, you have a huge treasure trove of developers out there with varying skill sets. And they can, if you want to talk to me, I'll point you in the right direction, get you in touch with some good ones. My contact info, if I haven't mentioned it already, maybe I'll take a quick break here to tell you how to get a hold of me. You can either contact your PCEM account executive to get a hold of me, or you can email me directly at Zorak, that's Z as in zebra, O-R-A-K, at apple.com. All right, moving on. So another point that I think is pretty important to understand is in terms of productivity, Apple's products support Exchange integration 100%. We have, as you see from the diagram here, on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your Mac, you're able to connect to Exchange. You're able to get to your global address list. You're able to do all of your calendaring and emailing. It's quite seamless integration. And if you didn't like Apple's tools to access your productivity, you can always use Outlook. Outlook is, if it's what you're used to and you demand to use Outlook, there's a version for Mac, and it's very nicely written. You'll find almost 100% feature parity between the Windows side and the Mac side. And of course, you've got the Word, PowerPoint, and Excel tools. These are all available from Microsoft as the Office suite. And if you're already purchasing licensing, I suggest you contact Microsoft and find out if it's a one-to-one exchange to go from Office for Mac, or I should say Office for Windows over to Mac. It depends on the kind of licensing structure you have, but I've heard, and this is only what I understand. I'm obviously not involved in licensing with Microsoft, but I've heard that there's one-to-one, so there shouldn't be no additional cost to migrate from one platform to the next. Don't mark my words on that. Just throwing that out there for your investigation. I suggest you do it. All right. And then for anybody that is using Active Directory for authentication on their PCs, Apple long ago had created Active Directory authentication for their product set. So you'll find that you could, again, just take a PC, shelve it, and put a Mac in its place, and you're going to authenticate to an Active Directory database. And in addition, all of your single sign-on will work seamlessly. So there you have it. Next, I'd like to talk briefly about security. I guess I should point out, first of all, that in terms of security, our operating system is built on Unix. The Mac OS as well as the iOS are built on Unix. These are operating systems that is very mature. It's been around for what, 30+ years, and in terms of security, it's rock solid, and you really generally never have to even reboot these machines. They're so stable. But some additional interesting, more recent software developments or security developments are listed to the left. We have sandboxing. This is technology that Apple has introduced with our iOS and now our Macs, where an application can only access its own data set. It can't get outside of its data set, so it can't get a hold of your contacts. It can't get a hold of other applications' data, and it makes for a very secure environment. In fact, it makes for such a secure environment that antivirus software proves to be fairly ineffective in a sandboxed environment, in that if you have an antivirus software in a sandboxed environment, all it can do is scan itself. It can't scan email. It can't scan anything else for viruses. It can only scan its own data set. So that being the case, it's very secure, very secure infrastructure, or I should say architecture. And it's so secure that even our 3-letter government agencies are allowing the use of these products at their organizations. Next, we have library randomization, which is used to thwart people that are trying to inject executable code into a registry. Every time we reboot or even on command, you can randomize your library so that there's no way for the bad guys to know exactly where that registry data is going to live. Not that Apple has a registry, but either way, you could insert malicious code and execute it if you knew where to put it. You don't know where to put it, though, if you have library randomization. Next, we have tag downloads. This is a really neat thing. You download an application or a file of any sort, and it's quarantined. And if you try to launch it, you are given a warning, hey, this thing wants to execute. Did you really want to download? Did you download this? Do you want to execute this? And if you say yes, then it goes ahead. If not, then you have the option to delete that file before it does something malicious. We've had tag downloads for a long time. Our operating system, personally, I have never seen it being used on my computer. I think that the bad guys figured that it was not even worth making malware for the Mac that would do that. And then, of course, we have account controls, which are just account access. And we also have account controls in terms of what you would consider from an IT perspective to be profiles and controls. Same things are available on the Mac that are available on the PC. And when it comes to those controls, we have a single management architecture for our iPads, iPhones, iPods, as well as our Macs, which is sort of an interesting new development that started in the last year. Traditionally, we've had client management software such as Altiris, as a Case. Those are the softwares you would use to control a Mac. Well, as of this year, you are using mobile device management to control not only your iOS devices, but your Mac as well. So you can have a fleet of portable computers, MacBook Airs, MacBooks floating around outside of your firewall, and they're leveraging the same services outside of your firewall that the iPhones and iPads use for their controls. And here's a list of some of those controls. You can push account settings to Macs so that the Wi-Fi passwords are pushed out encrypted-wise, and VPN is being put. All your certificates are being pushed out if you're using certificates. So what's great about this is that you don't have people calling up the help desk asking, hey, how do I set up this? How do I set up that? Right? And then, of course, you can push passcode policies of regarding the password length, complexity, age, the rotation cycle, etc. You have restrictions to prevent people from running certain types of applications, certain applications. You can whitelist, blacklist, and you can manipulate preferences for files. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but the bottom line is that anything you can do in terms of management from the traditional client management software, you can now do from a mobile device management software, and at a fraction of the cost, typically. So if you already are using mobile device management for your iOS devices or considering it, then you may want to take a look at controlling all of your Macs as well from that software. Apple has a really nice profile management software. It's part of the OS X Mountain Lion server solution. So if you have a Mac sitting around, or if you'd like to purchase a Mac from PC Mall that has the operating system, the client operating system even running on it, Mountain Lion, you can pay an additional small fee. I believe it's around $20 through the App Store. And there you have a server, the Apple server, and you have a mobile device management solution. And if that mobile device management solution doesn't do enough for you, you can always investigate some of the third parties' client management, or I should say, mobile device management solutions. So now shifting away from the IT and the technical stuff, one more quote here that I think is interesting. This is from Network World, and another quote from Gartner. Again, they were never kind to us until we really made a huge impact on business over the last few years, and now they really do appreciate us. The era of no Mac supply is coming to an end. In fact, today, Macs come out, on average, slightly ahead in terms of cost, according to Gartner. Now, everybody in the audience is probably very skeptical when they read this, but this is Gartner, and they've done their homework. And let me explain to you why they explained, well, they're trying to tell business leaders that Macs come out ahead in terms of cost. Now, it is kind of mind-blowing, but just to sort of dumb it down here, the cost of acquisition plus the operating costs of a computer plus its disposition and trade-in value, right? These are the things that equal the TCO of a device. And anybody that's been through any sort of accounting around IT, they'll understand this. They live and breathe it. And if we look at acquisition costs, this is really where Apple doesn't shine, right? Apple is more expensive. And just look at it. It should be. It's beautiful hardware. It's incredibly well built. It's incredibly stable. We take a lot of pride. We take a lot of pride in our craftsmanship. We take a lot of pride in the fact that the solution is very stable, and it's a great, not only is it a great piece of hardware, but it's also a great user experience on the software side. So moving on, let's just say that a Mac is going to be, let's say, just for the sake of argument, $500 more expensive than a PC, an equivalent PC, which is all arguable, but let's just pretend that it's $500 delta. Now, if you look at operating support costs, what we have found, and what Gartner found, and what most every other company that has deployed Macs on a large scale has found, is that there are many less calls coming into the help desk. And these many less calls coming into the help desk are really where a lot of the budget goes, right? But staffing that help desk is expensive, and it's a lot of tedious work to support a huge staff of end users. So if you deploy the Macs in a sensible way, using a mobile device management solution and using some online tools to educate people, what you'll find is that most end users that have a Mac are used to Googling their solutions anyway, and they talk to each other. So you're going to find your operating and support costs are much lower with a Mac. That's what we found. And then lastly, your disposition and trade-in values. Incredible story here. So you spent $500 or $300 to $500 more for a Mac. If you look at this disposition and trade-in value on a PC after 3 or 4 years, that computer is probably worth nothing. In fact, you may have to pay to have that computer disposed of, right? If you take a Mac or take a Mac and look at the disposition trade-in after 3 to 4 years, I don't have any real-world numbers in front of me. I'll allow you to contact me, and I can give you some information on that. But PCM has a trade-in company that they work with. The computer is worth $300 to $400 after 3 to 4 years. So if you think about it, you're paying $300, $400, $500 more for a Mac up front, but you get all that money back. Not all of it, but $300 to $400 of it back after 3 to 4 years, right? So if you think of it this way, you're making an investment, but you're going to recoup that on the next sales cycle, if you will, acquisition cycle, then it really doesn't look that bad on paper. And not only that, your operating and support costs are going to be lower. So as Gartner says, Macs do come out ahead in terms of costs. It just is a question of, okay, let's talk to our CFO. Let's look at the finances. Let's look at the acquisition costs. Let's budget them up front. And let's do a cost analysis. Let's make sure that we're very intelligently deploying these Macs. We don't want a lot of calls coming into the help desk, and we should have a measurable. Within 6 months, we should have a measurable baseline to know that the Macs really are cheaper, and that we're able to run our business on Macs. And we have happier end users. We have more productive end users. And as IT, we're actually being thanked rather than being on the far end of the spectrum, reviled. But I hope nowadays there are no IT orgs that are reviled, but you never know. So I digress. Let me move on here. Oh, I apologize. I do have some residual values here. So you look at these trade-in values. So on a 2009 MacBook Pro 15-inch, so 2009, $525 trade-in value. That's incredible, isn't it? And in 2008, $380. So if there's a $500 delta, you can have that computer free 4 years, and you're recouping a lot of that money when you trade it in. And when you do trade in those pieces of hardware, they go back into your account. They don't come in the form of a check, which is never necessarily good because checks are kind of hard to deal with at a company. Like, where does this money go? But if it goes back into your account at PCM, that's an option. Then you can just apply it to your next acquisition cycle. Now let's talk about why, as a company, it's important to allow end users to start to use Macs, or allow more end users to use Macs. So this is interesting. This is IDC put together this high-ed notebook market share analysis, and they found that over the years from 2009 to 2012, we have 39% of the market share right now. It's quite huge, and the iPad has, if you include them, people using the iPad as their means of taking notes and what have you at a school. Apple owns 53% of that, which is just enormous. It's just an enormous market share, and the reason for this is that people are going through school nowadays, and most of them, when they're graduating from high school, have never used anything but a Mac. And when they get into college, they're, of course, using an iPad. They're using a Mac to do their schoolwork, right? Now, why does this matter to you? This matters to you. Whoop, I apologize. I need to go back one slide. This matters to you because this is your hiring pool. These are the people you're hiring from, your next gen of employees. And now, mind you, there's a dearth of jobs currently, but it's getting better and better. And let's face it, people can become more and more choosy as we move forward. So not to say this is going to be a make it or break it for you for hiring somebody, but in the future, it may sweeten the deal. If you offer the option to use Apple products in your environment, you may get some of that talent and retain some of that talent if you are supporting Apple products. So how do we work together? Apple has helped a lot of companies through a transition, moving from not supporting Apple products to fully supporting them, or even supporting them on a limited scale. And we do that by offering some planning tools, and we do that by getting you in touch with your PCM sales reps that can help you through the procurement aspect. And then in terms of deployment, we, again, can bring our expertise. PCM can help, image hardware. We can teach you how to image hardware if that's something you want to do. We can give you best practices around deploying a large amount of Apple products in your environment. And then lastly, we can help you get up and running in terms of support. So if you have a help desk, we can get them trained up. We offer training for them. PCM offers training classes for help desks. So in fact, PCM's organizations have actually has written training for Apple's employees. So quite a great story there. And here's some resources that I put together for you. If you, and we talked about many of these already, but if you decide you want to deploy Macs on a wider scale, we have a lot of resources. We'll go through some of those in a minute that I have for you. Just reach out to me at zorak@apple.com. I'll get these in your hands. We have the trade-in program offered via PCM. We have Apple leasing and financing. I'll talk about that in a second. That's also very compelling. If you don't want to trade in, leasing is a really interesting option, leasing through Apple. And of course, we can build order systems for you if that's something that's important. And then we have Apple Care to support your end users, if that's something you want to do, or to support your help desks. Let's talk about leasing for a second. This is Apple Financial Services. This is really quite intriguing. Especially when it comes to the iPad. But if you buy, and now mind you, the numbers that are on here that are on this slide are for transactions between $50,000 and $250,000. This is a large transaction. It's an all-at-once sort of thing. So if you are looking at if you were going to buy a lot of iPads for a certain project, or if you decided that you're just going to, uproot some PCs and put some Macs in place of them, then these numbers might make sense. But even if you're not going to spend $50,000, which is a large chunk of change, the numbers above, when we talk about the duration of the lease and the percentages, they will change slightly, but do pay attention to them. They're amazing. So if you are on a 24-month lease, you're going to be paying on 80% of the value of those pieces of hardware. So you're saving 20% of the value. This is really important when it comes to iPad, because we noticed that most companies will refresh their iPads every 2 years. Now, if you were going to refresh the iPads every 3 years, or your Macs every 3 or 4 years, then you're going to see you're going to be paying up to 10% off. But it's quite nice if you want to get some of the money into OpEx. It's really something to take note of. If there's something that's interesting to you, please contact myself or your account executive. We'll get together and we'll talk to Apple Financial Services, and we'll put together a quote for you. And they love doing that. It's a very quick and painless process. Moving on, if you do want to work with me and you want me to help you get your company up and running in terms of supporting Macs, I would suggest doing a proof of concept and a pilot to sort of figure out where Macs are going to fit and what needs to be done. We can condense the time to do this whole entire process. Apple's done this a lot. We started with Cisco about 6 years ago, and we've put together a lot of materials to make this a really fast timeline. Among those materials we've put together is a nice book called Mac in the Enterprise. If anybody's interested in getting a copy of this, please contact me. I can have one mailed out to you. This is a really neat book. It gives you a 10,000-foot overview of how the Mac integrates into the enterprise. I think it pretty much is just slightly more in depth than what I talked about today. And then, of course, we have our white papers that are posted on our website. Anybody that's interested, reach out to me. I'll give you the URL to get those. We have a book, and then we have a soft copy of that book here that is available. These are for IT orgs that really want to get into the nuts and bolts. The configuration guide, if you really want to know every nook and cranny of integrating Macs into the IT, the enterprise, I can put together an instance of this website for you or send the book out. And this is not for the faint of heart. This is for people that really are moving ahead. You've made a decision. You want Macs in your environment. Let's do it, right? This is for IT to work through that process, and I will work with you, and we'll answer all those questions and make sure you're 100% supported. And then we also have these deployment kits. We put these together, like I said, starting with Cisco and moving forward. These are really good tools. They make sure that you have they're a checklist ultimately. Make sure you don't miss anything while you're things you need to consider while introducing a new platform. These are available. I can send them to you via email if you reach out to me. All right, folks, it's been fun. I'm going to sum up here really quickly just to refresh if you haven't seen this before. We have become #1 in customer support, and it was Consumer Reports, customer satisfaction, #1 in reliability with PC World, and lastly, we're Reader's Choice for our Macs and our laptops and desktops with PC Magazine. And this is a very competitive. All these are very competitive environments, and we've worked very hard at Apple to become #1. And become Reader's Choice in PC Magazine's case. We take a lot of pride in our products and in our operating system, especially in our hardware. And on top of that, all of our Apple Care is amazing. They do amazing work. So with that being said, I'm going to sum it up. I hope after this presentation today, you're compelled to make Macs an approved standard in your enterprise there. And the most important touchstones here is that you can take a Mac and it seamlessly integrates into your infrastructure. And if you do it right, you're going to find that your support costs are much lower. And not only that, your total cost of ownership is going to be lower, which is not something you're probably used to hearing, but it is true. And take it from me, take it from Gartner, take it from all the companies that have deployed Macs on a large scale. They're a huge benefit to your business. And let's face it, your end users are going to thank you because it's a much better user experience than the competition, let me tell you. All right, well, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And any Q&A? Do we have any questions on the line?
All right, thank you, Joe. We will now be moving to our live question and answer portion of today's presentation. If you have any questions, do send them in using the question and answer pane. Let's just wait for the questions to come in. We have, all right, one of the attendees is asking if you could repeat how they could get a copy or copies of the white papers.
Yes, absolutely. Do me a favor. I don't have the URL off the top of my head, and my computer screen is tied up with WebEx. But if you send me an email at Zorak, that's Z as in zebra, O-R-A-K as in kilo at apple.com, I will send you an email back with the URLs to the white papers.
All right, I am typing it in now for the participants, for everyone to see.
Thank you.
All right. And then, so that's your email address, right?
That is correct. That is my personal email address, and it's a lot easier to spell than Schubach, let me tell you.
Yeah. Okay, here's another question. I've been administering a hybrid Mac Windows environment for over 8 years. Are there any improvements in tying into a AD domain as far as group policy to control the Mac workstations?
Well, in terms of improvements, we're constantly making improvements, and I would have to. I'm trying to infer some things from the question, but I think first of all, the question is begging: is Apple ever going to support the Microsoft Group Policy Engine in order to enforce controls? And the question, the answer is, I don't know that certain. In fact, I hear that many administrators would like to control both Mac and PCs from the same console. And nowadays, that can be achieved via SCM and some other tools that are out there that are hybrid tools. But what we have found, by and large, the feedback from IT has been that using a separate tool is generally a better user experience for IT. So, of course, you administer Cisco and your Windows devices from different consoles, right? So another console would be, say, a Mac client management solution. But I would suggest moving away from that even and controlling all of your Macs policy engine-wise with mobile device management. So if you're using, say, Jamf, or if you're using Mobile Iron or AirWatch, or just Apple's Profile Manager within our OS X server, Mountain Lion server solution, then you should be able to use those tools to administer a fleet of Macs. And frankly, it's a pleasant user experience for IT to do that.
All right. Thank you. Here's another question. He says, thank you for your contact information. I teach enterprise users, and many professional offices are going paperless with iPads and PDF documents. Sounds like you and MacMall can be used as resources to assist in this transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going paperless is a huge motivator financially nowadays for companies, just because of A, the cost of the paper, B, the cost of the printing, C, the cost of the shipping in some cases if this is a field situation, and then D, the amount of time it takes to fill out the paperwork and then do the actual data entry on a computer is time wasted when you can actually just do, with check marks and light data entry on an iPad or an iPhone, the same work. So yeah, absolutely. Companies are very interested in paperless nowadays. Now, in terms of MacMall being able to assist, I'm not sure if MacMall has a development organization that is going to be able to do that for you. However, if you want to reach out to me at zorak@apple.com, I will get you in touch with, I'll provide, how about this? I'll provide you a list of companies that do software development, and you can reach out to them and ask them what it looks like to put together an application that would sort of tackle your paperless efforts.
All right. Thanks so much. Next question. Are Macs able to integrate or use Microsoft SharePoint services?
Absolutely. Now, but that's with a caveat, right? With an asterisk here. When you buy Microsoft Office, there is a custom install of a tool that allows you to access SharePoint via a Mac application. So there is that tool. Now, the feedback I've gotten about that tool, I think it's called Document Express. I'm so sorry. It starts with Document. But anyway, it's a custom install. And the feedback I've gotten has not been so positive around that application. But then again, don't let me color your perspective. Please try it out and see how it works for you. Now, there's another company. It's called SharePlus. They have a version of their software that accesses SharePoint that you can use from an iPad, an iPhone, and a Mac. I mean, there's 3 different softwares, but you can download them for each platform. And the feedback I've gotten on that has been varied as well. I think that SharePoint users have varied feedback because each SharePoint environment looks a little bit different and has different features that are being used. So I highly suggest you look at the Microsoft solution, look at the SharePlus solution. And lastly, of course, there is, with SharePoint, the option to go fully web-based, and that would work just as well on a Mac as a PC. So there you go, 3 options.
Thank you. Next, I am in the medical field, and from a security point of view, I am being told by our IT staff that the iPad and iPhone are not secure enough to run our EHR since they can't be encrypted. Our EHR is a Citrix-based application. And it ends there. No,
okay.
Well, it's not really a question, just a comment.
Well, this is a difficult question to answer. There are a lot of complexities around it, but let me just throw out a few nuggets, if you will. And if you'd like, reach out to me directly, whomever asked that question. We can set up some meetings to get around these. But now, first of all, when it comes to encryption, I want to point out that Apple's hardware nowadays, everything from the iPad 2 forward and iPhone 4 forward, are hardware encrypted out of the box, no matter what, right? So if you're concerned about security around encryption on the hardware, worry not. Apple's hardware is encrypted 100%. And it is AES 256-bit encryption, so it's incredibly strong encryption. On top of that, we support encryption across the wire, so everything going across the network via SSL/TLS and VPN and what have you is all encrypted, right? So at the network level, you have full disk encryption. Then at the application level, now this is not necessarily going to apply to Citrix. We can talk about that more in depth in a minute. But at the application level, if you don't want to rely on just the hardware encryption, you can even put software encrypted containers on top of the hardware so that if somebody magically got through the hardware encryption, which is infeasible, then there would be a software container they'd have to dig through as well, encryption-wise. So let me tell you, that most hospitals out there have already figured out that encryption around EHR is not a problem at all. We see EHR being used on iPads everywhere because doctors demanded it right away when they saw the platform. And you'll be hard-pressed. It's unfortunate that you're having these difficulties with IT, but it's just a simple misunderstanding. We can set up a phone call. We can go through security-based slide decks. We can get you in touch with Apple's marketing organization who work only with the medical field, and they can, along with our engineers, talk to your IT org, and we can get through any concerns you have. Now, when it comes to Citrix, the Citrix communications can be encrypted across the network, and no data necessarily would need to even be stored if you're using Citrix on the iOS device. Citrix has a lot of features around wrapping applications, so depending upon how your EHR is being deployed on the iOS device, further encryption can be enabled via that wrapping. Man, where else do I go? You know, I don't think that this is a solution. Let me say that based upon what I know, there should be no reason that you shouldn't be able to use your EHR software on Apple's solutions. So please reach out to me. I'm happy to set up those meetings, and we can get to the bottom of it and hopefully get that EHR software deployed to everybody within your hospital there.
All right. Thanks so much. We have a couple more questions. If we're hoping to upgrade our file server from Xserve to the new Mac Pro. Any idea when that product is going to be available? Also, is Apple dedicated to continuing its commitment to the OS X server software with continued features and updates?
Well, I'm not Apple's spokesperson for the server line, but based upon what I've seen, the server product has been evolving beautifully. It's quite a complex and comprehensive solution at this point. I think it would be very difficult to argue that there's any aspect to the server product that lacks. Again, I can't make any forward-looking statements. I'm not allowed to as the type of employee that I am. However, I can say that if history is to be a judge, then we're doing quite well with our server products. There's no reason we would be avoiding them. Now, when it comes to the Mac Pro, the release date hasn't been announced. I believe fall was the general release time frame. The Mac Pro is, from what I can tell, going to be an incredible piece of hardware. It's not necessarily the best Xserve replacement in that Apple doesn't provide a server solution now that has all the redundancy that's built into an Xserve. What I have seen nowadays is that most companies are replacing their Xserves with Mac Minis and rack mounting those Mac Minis, and fiber channels involved using bridges from Thunderbolt to fiber. There have been very few complaints about that solution. The Mac Minis are faster than the Xserves were, the fastest Xserves. So the current Mac Minis are faster than the fastest Xserves were that when we stopped making them. So it may be more cost beneficial to you even just to consider a Mac Mini. If that's something that you may want to consider, reach out to me and we can do some more investigation around that if you'd like.
All right, thanks so much. Next question. When I try to access webinars from other companies, I am told I need to run Adobe Flash, which Apple doesn't support. Will they be supporting this anytime in the future?
Well, Apple supports Flash on the Mac platform, so you have that at your disposal. Now, when it comes to iOS devices, portable devices, Apple initially and since when the iPhone initially rolled out, I should say, Apple said no to Flash, I'm not going to say exactly why, but apparently, from what I understand, there were some battery management issues around Flash, and frankly, Apple, the iPhone is one of the first products potentially that's going to be in someone's hands. And somebody that's never owned an Apple product before, they get their hands on an Apple product for the first time. It's an iPhone, and then Flash is not treating them the way that we like. Yeah, no, we're not going to allow that on our platform. And Android even since has said no. And not only that, Adobe has scuttled Flash as a product line. They're sustaining it, but they don't develop on it anymore. They're not developing it as a product. It's being shelved in place of HTML5, even at Adobe. So the past is Flash. That's just the way the industry is at this point. The future is HTML5, and it's going to be the future is much brighter than the experience with Flash.
All right. What were the programs used for virtual machines again? Do you have a particular one that is best used on Macs?
Yeah, I can't really suggest one over the other. I personally have used two of them. One is called Parallels, P-A-R-A-L-L-E-L-S, and then there's another one from VMware called Fusion, so VMware Fusion. It's another one that I've used. And then there's one from Sun Microsystems, who is obviously been purchased since by Oracle, called, oh man, shouldn't have opened my mouth, but they have one, and I believe it's a free download if it's still available. Yeah. So if you do a search for, well, again, I would do it on my computer, but my screen is tied up with a WebEx. But if you do a search for virtual workstation Sun or Oracle, you'll find it.
Someone says here VirtualBox. Is that it?
Oh, that's the one, VirtualBox. Thank you, VirtualBox.
Thank you, guys.
And then of course, by the way, I should mention also there is Citrix as a solution, which is slightly different. It's not, you don't emulate the operating system on your computer using Citrix. Instead, you have a central server that is serving up Windows instances to a Mac, So that's another consideration, Citrix.
All right, thanks. Somebody asks, if students are starting to use iPads in school now, will Apple bring out an affordable iPad price that all classes can afford?
Well, that's quite a loaded question. Now, PCM, I don't believe, sells iPads to educational institutions. They do sell them to, of course, students directly. So the pricing for schools is going to be provided via Apple. So if you work at a school and you would like to talk pricing, the pricing for education is quite compelling for a school district or for a school, a standalone school. Be aware of that. I can't speak directly to numbers, but you'll be quite impressed with the discounting around Apple solutions for schools. Now, if you're a typical end user and you are a student and you want to purchase Apple products, then the pricing is as it is via PCM. PCM does offer standard and better than standard pricing in those cases. And when I say PCM, I mean Mac Mall, incidentally.
All right, thanks. Next question, how could I approach my clients in reference to the pricing difference between purchasing a Mac versus PC?
Well, that's going to be very specific to the environment, but I think that the way that I would approach it is just as I mentioned earlier, where we would have to say to whomever is making the budgetary decisions around the platform that Apple has found and is relaying to us that the total cost of ownership of a Mac is less than a PC. Gartner is saying this, Forrester is saying this, Cisco is saying this. These are companies that have deployed Macs on a wide scale, and they've done their own cost analysis and done their investigation through Gartner and Forrester and said, yep, Macs are less expensive than PCs, but we have to deploy them in a reasonable manner. You can't just throw a bunch of Macs out there and expect the price to be good, because people are going to be calling the help desk like mad, right? If you do it that way, you need to manage them. Just like with group policy, you need to manage the solutions that you're going to deploy, or you're going to have a ton of calls coming into the help desk, and it's not going to look nice on paper. So that's my suggestion. And also, you need to make sure that the chief financial officer or whomever's in charge of the money understands that Macs are higher in terms of acquisition, but the trade-in value, the residual value on these after 3 to 4 years is very high, and that money is recouped. Okay, those are the most important points to sort of relay, if you ask me.
All right, thanks.
And also, and by the way, I should mention, whenever I have that conversation, focusing on the hard benefits are nice, but we should never forget the soft benefits. Are the end users asking for Mac? Yes, probably. Are they using Macs at home and they have to come in? Are they complaining about having to use a PC? Do they call the help desk a lot because of typical PC problems where the help desk asks them to restart and the problem goes away, right? These are questions that should be also considered when considering this entire idea of allowing Macs as well as PCs to be equally chosen by an end user. And when I say chosen, this is the choose your own environments that most every company nowadays is either considering or has deployed, where when the refresh cycle comes along, people are allowed to get a Mac or a PC, right? Or they can get a Windows phone or a Mac phone, right? Or an Apple, I should say an iPhone, right? So this is the choose your own, if you will, environment. These are for companies that don't really want to support BYO. And BYO is risky in that if you're going to support literally anything that walks in the door, that's very difficult for IT to manage, right? CYO is a little bit different. It's still a company asset in most cases. If it's not a phone, it's going to be a company asset probably. And IT is to say, okay, you can get this kind of Mac, you can get this kind of PC. You just really lock it down. You don't need to say every Mac, every PC. You don't want a Lenovo and a Dell and a, et cetera, to come in the door. That would be very hard to support. You say, you can have this Mac, or you can have this PC, you can have this iPhone, you can have this iPad, and you can have, these other devices. But you as IT get to decide exactly what those are.
All right, thanks so much. We have one last question, I guess, for the session. What is the learning curve for transition from PC to Mac?
That's a really good question, and that's something that we always considered. In fact, that's something we considered when we were at Cisco. We first encountered it at Cisco, I should say, when we helped them migrate to CYO, and we found that it took about we did a survey, monkey survey after the fact, and we asked end users that were using the Mac, how long did it take to transition comfortably? And most everybody said about 2 weeks before. There was none of this, oh, how do I blah, 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 how do I blah, blah, blah. And what we should have done at Cisco, which we didn't, and we have done since, is that for companies that are migrating to allow choose your own people to use Macs, we should have hosted at Cisco a training session, and since then we have offered that to other companies that have allowed Macs to be used. Apple will come in some cases, or PC or Mac Mall will somehow assist, or you can even hire a third party to come in, and they can offer Mac 101 training, and have maybe have maybe open sessions for people that are choosing Macs. They come in, they sit down in an auditorium, or you can even buy online training through a bunch of companies that offer Mac 101 training, and train people to use the Mac, so that transition, that 2 weeks, is cut down to much faster than 2 weeks, down to maybe even 1 week or less. And then, of course, there are online classes that you can even offer. It's a little less personal, and I think people probably would be less compelled to sit and click through an entire training session on Mac 101, but you can do that. And Apple has a couple of websites that are available. There's a Switch website and the 101 website on apple.com that are free, and those are explicitly there just to help you migrate from one platform to the next. So any of those questions about, hey, how do I change the background picture? Well, it's called desktop, on Mac. Things like that, the little things. How do I use this mouse? I'm confused. What are these? How are the gestures on the keypad? I don't get it. All these are answered on those websites. So yeah, transition should be really easy. Apple is very conscious of the fact that there are people that have been using PCs for years that are using Macs for the first time, and it's not just so simple as an automatic. I mean, even though a little kid can sit down and use an Apple product and know what they're doing, right? I mean, that's what's so beautiful about our operating system. But that does not negate the fact that people have been using PCs for years, and their brains need to be able to shift and be able to function very quickly without being, stuttering over, oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? So anyway, there are some resources, and if you have any questions around that, and if you need some links, reach out to me at zorak@apple.com. I'll send you a group of links that will get you up and running on training for end users.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have. Joe, do you have any last few words, final ones? Do you want to add?
No, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and anything I can do to help you migrate to choose your own or BYO, reach out to me. I'm there for you. I'm your resource. I'm actually dedicated just to you. Any of MacMoss customers I work with directly, so you can come out to me and I'll do everything I can to help you.
Thanks so much. Should you have any additional questions, you can send them in offline, or you can contact Joe directly, and your questions will be addressed by him. Thank you. I would like to thank you, Joe, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Have a great rest of your day.